think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit.
Gold lampposts flickered against the damp stone facade of Buckingham Palace as Prince William walked through the grand entrance doors, carrying a faded blue envelope tied with a silk ribbon. Inside that sealed packet rested Princess Diana's final handwritten letter to Charles, a document that Camilla had spent nearly 3 decades trying to erase from the royal archives. When William placed the yellowed paper directly onto the king's mahogany desk during an emergency midnight summit, the hidden truth of past deceptions was finally brought to light, leaving Camilla completely stunned and facing an irreversible royal reckoning. The midnight discovery at Highgrove House. Prince William knelt on the oak floorboards of the private library at Highgrove House. He pressed his fingers against a loose wooden slat near the base of the tall bookshelf. The board gave way with a faint creak. He lifted the piece of timber aside to reveal a small, dark recess hollowed out beneath the floor. A heavy iron lockbox rested inside the dust. He reached down and gripped the cold metal handles, pulling the box out into the open room. The brass latch was locked tight, bearing a small royal cipher stamped directly into the metal plate. Securing hidden caches within historic royal properties follows emergency estate recovery protocols established by the Crown. When private floor vaults are uncovered during structural inspections, security teams must document the exact discovery location before opening the enclosure to preserve legal evidence chains. William pulled a small brass key from his trouser pocket. He slid the key into the lock and turned it twice. The heavy lid popped open with a sharp click. Inside the box lay a single, faded blue envelope tied with a length of white silk ribbon. A thick red wax seal secured the knot at the center of the packet. William broke the wax seal with his thumb and pulled out a folded sheet of heavy stationery. The handwriting scrawled across the paper was instantly recognizable as that of Princess Diana. Examining historical correspondence recovered from private vaults requires certified archival handling to prevent damage to fragile paper fibers. Forensic conservators inspect wax seals and paper watermarks to verify the authentic origin of sealed documents. An unexpected sound echoed from the dark hallway outside the library door. A low floorboard creaked under the weight of someone stepping softly across the corridor outside. William froze in place, holding the blue paper in his gloved hand. He signaled silently to the protection officer stationed by the entrance. The officer drew his flashlight and stepped toward the heavy wooden door, his hand resting near his belt holster. Investigating unauthorized intrusions in private residential wings during late-night estate operations requires immediate tactical coordination to secure all exit routes and prevent potential evidence tampering. The door handle turned slowly downward. The brass latch clicked as the door swung open by 2 inches. A beam of light cut across the dark floorboards as the estate night supervisor peered into the room. He blinked against the light of William's tactical lamp and stammered an apology, explaining that he was conducting routine security checks across the ground floor. William exhaled slowly and told the supervisor to secure the outer perimeter doors immediately. Verifying staff movement schedules during unexpected estate encounters ensures that unauthorized personnel do not interfere with high-priority artifact recoveries. The night supervisor nodded and backed out of the doorway, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind him. William looked back down at the open metal box. He carefully unfolded the blue stationery sheet and read the date written at the top of the first page. The date matched the exact week of the 1997 state reorganization at Kensington Palace. The letter was addressed directly to Charles, containing detailed accounts of secret asset transfers and hidden documents that had never reached the king's desk. Cross-referencing historical dates on recovered letters with internal estate administrative logs confirms the exact timeline of suppressed correspondence. William slid the letter back into the blue envelope and placed it inside a secure waterproof pouch. He snapped the iron lid of the lockbox shut and stood up from the floor. The first hidden piece of the puzzle was now safely in his possession, setting the stage for the emergency confrontation that would soon shake Buckingham Palace to its foundations. Unsealing the long-lost correspondence. Dr. Marcus Vance adjusted the dual-tube magnifying visor over his eyes. He sat under the sharp glare of a halogen microscope inside the subterranean conservation suite at Somerset House. The blue paper envelope recovered from the iron lockbox rested on a clean glass stage before him. He picked up a pair of titanium-tipped tweezers from the side tray. He gripped the edge of the folded stationery with extreme care. He began to open the creases of the aged sheet. The blue paper was slightly yellowed along the folds, but the dark ink remained crisp and intact. Preserving delicate historical correspondence requires specialized atmospheric control chambers to prevent humidity fluctuations from damaging fragile 19th and 20th century paper fibers. Conservators utilize low-intensity optical illumination to examine handwriting integrity without exposing organic materials to harmful thermal radiation. Marcus aligned the microscope lens over the top left corner of the first page. He focused the optics down to 40 times magnification. The handwritten date inscribed at the head of the letter read August 12th, 1997. It was written precisely 2 weeks before the fatal crash in Paris. The handwriting exhibited rapid, firm pen strokes that pressed deeply into the blue stationery weave. Diana had detailed a series of administrative meetings held behind closed doors at Kensington Palace regarding unrecorded asset transfers. Verifying historical document dates involves cross-referencing ink oxidation patterns with official estate dispatch logs preserved in national archives. When handwritten dates align perfectly with documented visitor arrivals, document authenticity is established beyond reasonable doubt. An unexpected notification chime sounded from the desktop terminal across the room. A red alert banner flashed silently across the computer monitor screen. Marcus stood up from his microscope bench and walked over to the terminal. He tapped the spacebar to open the incoming encrypted data packet. The message originated from the central estate security server upstairs. It indicated that an external data query had just attempted to access the digital storage node containing the scanned images of Diana's letter. Monitoring digital archives for unauthorized access attempts protects sensitive historical documents from cyber intrusions during active judicial investigations. State cybersecurity protocols automatically log every IP address that queries classified archival databases. Marcus typed a quick security override code into the terminal. He locked down the specific storage sector to block any further external data requests. He walked back to the glass stage and picked up a fiber optic ultraviolet wand. He swept the violet light across the lower half of the blue stationery sheet. A series of faint, hidden chemical annotations appeared in the margins between the primary paragraphs. These margin notes recorded the names of 2 senior financial officers who had authorized the transfer of charitable funds into private accounts. Ultraviolet fluorescence analysis reveals hidden chemical alterations and marginalia that remain invisible under standard white light conditions. Forensic document examiners rely on specific wavelength frequencies to uncover erased or secondary ink applications on historical manuscripts. Marcus leaned closer to inspect the micro-lettering in the margin. He recognized the distinct shorthand symbols used by royal household auditors during the late 90s. The annotations proved that the letter had been reviewed by an internal oversight committee shortly after its creation, only to be deliberately suppressed and hidden away inside the floor vaults of Highgrove House. The cover-up had been orchestrated from the highest administrative levels. Uncovering suppressed administrative notes within personal correspondence exposes systemic institutional failures. Historical investigations depend on these physical clues to reconstruct how critical documents were intercepted and concealed from reigning monarchs. Marcus powered down the ultraviolet lamp and gently slid the blue stationery sheet into a clear mylar preservation sleeve. He sealed the opening with a heated thermal press. He picked up the protective case and walked toward the secure vault doors at the back of the laboratory. The long-lost letter was now fully examined and cataloged. The physical evidence was locked tight, setting the stage for the high-level confrontation that would soon unfold inside Buckingham Palace. Camilla's desperate attempt to intercept Camilla slammed the heavy mahogany study door shut behind her chief legal counsel. She strode across the Persian rug toward her ornate writing desk. Her hand shook as she reached for the secure red landline telephone resting on the corner of the leather blotter. She punched in a direct override code connecting to the Central Administrative Registry at Whitehall. The line buzzed once before a sharp administrative voice answered on the other end. Camilla spoke without a standard greeting. She ordered her legal secretary to file an immediate emergency injunction to block the delivery of any historical correspondence originating from Highgrove House. Emergency legal injunctions filed by royal administrative officers during active constitutional disputes require immediate documentation of procedural flaws by defense attorneys. When high-ranking estate managers face imminent exposure, legal teams attempt to block document transfers by invoking archaic crown privacy clauses embedded in 19th century letters patent. The lawyer on the other end of the Whitehall line cleared his throat nervously. He told Camilla that an emergency injunction would fail instantly against a direct sovereign writ issued from Buckingham Palace. He explained that King Charles had already signed an executive order earlier that morning, stripping all remaining legal protections away from previous administrative departments. Camilla dropped the telephone handset onto its cradle. The plastic casing cracked along the base from the impact. She turned away from the desk and walked over to the tall sash window overlooking the inner courtyard. Challenging direct sovereign executive orders in British courts remains legally impossible under constitutional doctrine. The reigning monarch holds absolute prerogative over internal estate management and document archiving, rendering standard civil injunctions entirely useless during structural crises. An unexpected flash of headlights cut across the white plaster ceiling of the study. A convoy of 2 black security vans rolled through the main wrought iron gates of Clarence House. Uniformed protection officers stepped out from the vehicles and moved quickly across the gravel drive. Their heavy boots crunched against the stone chips in the damp night air. Camilla watched them surround the secondary service entrance from her second-floor window. She reached down into the bottom drawer of her walnut desk and pulled out a heavy metal lockbox. She pried the latch open with a steel letter opener. Securing estate perimeters during high-profile administrative takeovers prevents subjects from destroying physical evidence or escaping the jurisdiction before warrants are fully executed by law enforcement details. Inside the metal lockbox lay 3 confidential financial ledgers dating back to 1997. The pages detailed the transfer of charitable trust funds into private offshore accounts managed by her former associates. Camilla grabbed a handful of loose papers and carried them over to the brick fireplace. A small electric heater glowed near the hearth. She shoved the papers against the metal heating coils, watching the white edges turn brown and catch fire. The acrid smell of burning paper filled the small room. Destroying physical evidence during an active state investigation constitutes a severe criminal offense under the Theft Act, carrying mandatory prison sentences for anyone caught tampering with court-ordered historical exhibits. Before the flames could consume the entire stack of documents, the study doors swung open with a loud crash. 2 royal protection officers stepped into the room. They moved quickly across the carpet. One officer grabbed Camilla by the wrist and pulled her away from the heater. The second officer stamped out the smoldering papers with his boot heel. He scooped up the remaining charred ledgers and dropped them into an evidence bag. The game was completely over. Intervening during active evidence destruction requires immediate physical restraint by trained security personnel to preserve whatever fragments remain of compromised historical records. Another officer walked into the study carrying a heavy silver clipboard. He handed Camilla a formal notice of immediate administrative suspension and asset forfeiture signed by the Lord Chancellor. She looked down at the official wax seal pressed into the red ribbon at the bottom of the page. She did not utter a single word. She dropped the letter opener onto the wooden desk and turned her back toward the window, leaving the ruined documents behind as the officers escorted her out of the room. Prince William placed the heavy leather briefcase flat against the polished mahogany surface of the royal consultation table. The room was dark, illuminated only by a single brass desk lamp, casting a warm circle of light across the green leather blotter. King Charles sat in the high-backed armchair opposite his son. He rested his hands on the carved armrests. Catherine stood quietly beside the tall velvet curtains near the garden window. William reached down to the brass latches of the case and popped them open with 2 crisp, metallic clicks. He lifted the lid and slid the authenticated blue envelope and the forensic reports out into the open light. Emergency briefings conducted within private royal chambers require strict adherence to protocol. When critical historical documents surface during active state investigations, reigning monarchs review the physical evidence directly alongside senior family representatives to establish immediate administrative control. Charles leaned forward in his chair. He reached out with his right hand and picked up the aged stationery sheet. He held the paper up toward the brass lamp to inspect the watermark embedded in the weave. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting penned by Diana in August 1997. Every line confirmed the financial irregularities and administrative cover-ups that had remained buried for nearly 3 decades. Charles set the letter down on the blotter with a slow, deliberate motion. He looked directly at William and asked if the Privy Council had been formally notified of the document's recovery. Verifying historical correspondence through direct sovereign inspection ensures that executive decisions regarding state transparency rest entirely upon authenticated physical evidence rather than unverified rumors. An unexpected tap sounded against the heavy oak study door before the brass handle turned slowly downward. The Lord Chancellor stepped across the threshold, carrying a black leather portfolio stamped with the royal seal. He walked over to the consultation table and placed his portfolio down beside the forensic reports. He told the king that the Emergency Legal Council had convened downstairs in the state dining room. He stated that 20 senior ministers were currently waiting to review certified copies of Diana's letter before the morning session commenced. Convening emergency advisory councils during major constitutional crises allows government ministers to evaluate newly uncovered evidence and coordinate uniform legislative responses across parliamentary departments. The Lord Chancellor unzipped his portfolio and pulled out a typed summary sheet. He handed the paper across the table to Charles. The document detailed the exact legal framework required to integrate the recovered correspondence into the official state register. William pointed to a specific paragraph near the bottom of the page. He explained that the emergency sovereign exemption rule allowed the Crown to bypass standard administrative waiting periods and publish the findings immediately. Charles nodded slowly in agreement, picking up his heavy silver fountain pen from the side tray. Executing sovereign exemptions during high-stakes institutional reforms grants the Crown immediate authority to bypass bureaucratic delays and protect public transparency. Charles uncapped the fountain pen and pressed the gold nib against the official approval form. He signed his name with firm, steady strokes across the bottom line. He handed the pen to the Lord Chancellor to witness the signature. The final administrative barrier was completely removed. The path was now wide open to present the authenticated evidence to the wider Privy Council. The hidden truths of the past were finally stepping out into the light of day. Deep within the subterranean archives of the palace, archival technicians worked under fluorescent panels to digitize every inch of the fragile blue paper. High-resolution optical scanners hummed quietly as they captured the exact fiber alignment of the stationery. Each digital scan was encrypted with a military-grade security key to prevent unauthorized interception by external actors. The technical team verified that the checksum values matched the physical master files secured inside the royal vault upstairs. Digitizing fragile historical artifacts guarantees long-term preservation, while enabling instantaneous secure transmission across government networks during major legal proceedings. A sudden drop in room temperature signaled an automated ventilation shift within the subterranean archive vaults. The senior archivist paused his work and checked the climate control monitors mounted beside the steel entrance door. The humidity gauges remained steady at 45%, perfectly within the required preservation threshold for 19th and 20th century paper documents. He resumed his inspection of the secondary envelope containing the witness statements collected from Highgrove House. Maintaining strict environmental parameters inside archive vaults prevents organic degradation of historical manuscripts during extended forensic analysis operations. William walked down the stone steps leading into the archive room, accompanied by 2 protection officers. He wanted to verify that the digital copies were fully uploaded to the secure parliamentary cloud server before dawn broke over London. The lead technician turned his computer monitor toward the prints and pointed to a green progress bar reading 100%. All files were successfully transferred and verified across the government network nodes. Verifying encrypted data transfers prior to public release ensures that state documents reach legislative committees without data corruption or packet loss. William thanked the technical staff and instructed them to lock the master terminals until further notice. He turned around and walked back up the stone staircase toward the private residential quarters. The physical evidence was secured, the digital copies were distributed, and the institutional apparatus was now fully aligned to handle the impending public disclosures. The long silence surrounding the 1997 events was officially broken. Finalizing administrative sign-offs on state documents marks the completion of internal review cycles, paving the way for transparent public accountability across all branches of government. Presenting the evidence to the Privy Council, senior ministers sat in absolute silence around the long mahogany council table inside the state dining room. The heavy oak doors remained locked from the inside by 2 royal guardsmen standing at rigid attention. A stack of certified photocopies of Princess Diana's authenticated letter rested in front of each leather chair. The Lord Chancellor stood at the head of the table, resting his hands flat against the polished wood. He looked around the room, meeting the gaze of every cabinet official present. He told the Assembly that the documents before them had been verified by forensic experts at Somerset House and approved directly by King Charles under emergency sovereign powers. Privy Council assemblies hold the constitutional authority to review emergency state documents during institutional crises. When historical evidence of administrative corruption or suppressed correspondence is presented, cabinet members evaluate the legal implications before authorizing formal legislative publication. The Lord Chancellor motioned toward the top page of the packet. He instructed the ministers to open their folders to page 3, where Diana's handwritten notes detailed the unrecorded asset transfers from 1997. Several ministers adjusted their reading glasses and leaned forward over the table, scanning the familiar handwriting line by line. The silence in the room grew heavy as the full weight of the revelations settled over the cabinet officers. No one spoke for several long moments. Reviewing disputed historical records within cabinet sessions ensures that high-ranking state officials examine primary source evidence before major policy announcements are released to the public domain. An unexpected sound broke the quiet atmosphere when a telephone on the side credenza began to ring. The private secretary stepped quickly across the carpet and lifted the heavy black handset to his ear. He listened for a few seconds, his expression hardening into a tight scowl. He whispered an urgent message into the ear of the Lord Chancellor. The Lord Chancellor nodded curtly and told the secretary to connect the call to the master speakerphone on the council table. A harsh, distorted voice crackled through the speaker box, demanding an immediate halt to the council proceedings, on behalf of outside legal representatives. Interceptions of cabinet meetings by external administrative agents trigger immediate security protocols to block unauthorized communications and protect ongoing state deliberations from external interference. The Lord Chancellor pressed a button on the base of the speaker unit, cutting off the audio transmission instantly. He looked back at the gathered ministers and stated that all outside legal challenges had been legally invalidated by the emergency crown exemption signed earlier that morning. He picked up his wooden gavel and struck the polished surface of the table once. He called for a formal voice vote to enter the complete dossier into the permanent parliamentary register. 20 hands rose into the air without a single dissenting vote recorded. Executing formal voice votes during cabinet emergency sessions finalizes administrative decisions and establishes unanimous governmental backing for major institutional reforms. The Lord Chancellor signed the final certification document and handed it to the Cabinet Secretary for immediate dispatch to the printing office at Westminster. The council session was adjourned. The ministers stood up from their chairs and gathered their papers, walking out through the heavy side doors into the bright corridor. The institutional wall of silence was completely dismantled, setting the final stage for the landmark public broadcast that would soon beam across every television screen in the nation. Cabinet members walked in tight formation down the vaulted stone corridor toward the inner courtyard exit. Special branch officers flanked the front and rear of the departing ministerial group. Each minister carried a secure leather folio containing the certified copies of Diana's correspondence. The morning sunlight broke through the high lancet windows, casting long diagonal beams across the worn marble floor tiles. The atmosphere remained thick with the quiet gravity of constitutional change. Maintaining strict security cordons during high-level ministerial departures prevents unauthorized access to classified state folios by external observers or rival political factions. An unexpected stir occurred near the intersection of the Peers hallway as a group of senior parliamentary aides rushed past the security checkpoint. One aide held a red advisory folder marked with urgent priority stamps. He intercepted the Home Secretary just before the exterior exit doors, handing over a fresh dispatch bulletin from the High Court registrar. The Home Secretary paused under the stone archway, opening the red folder to scan the typed contents printed on the single sheet of parchment. Delivering breaking judicial updates to departing cabinet ministers ensures that executive leaders remain fully informed of rapid legal developments during constitutional transitions. The Home Secretary read through the brief text twice. The advisory confirmed that the High Court had officially dismissed all remaining legal petitions filed by former Clarence House administrators. The final judicial obstacle standing in the way of complete transparency had been entirely swept away. He folded the parchment in half and tucked it into his coat pocket. He looked up at the waiting security detail and gave a single, firm nod of approval. Dismissing outstanding legal challenges through High Court rulings provides absolute judicial clearance for executive actions, protecting state officials from subsequent civil or criminal liability. The heavy oak exit doors swung outward, revealing the waiting line of government transport vehicles idling against the curb. The ministers climbed into the back seats of the cars in quick succession. The motorcade pulled away smoothly from the entrance, merging into the morning traffic lanes leading toward Whitehall. The institutional mechanism of the British state was now moving forward with unstoppable momentum, carrying the long-buried truths of the past directly toward the public domain. Coordinating ministerial motorcades during major policy rollouts ensures that key government officials arrive at departmental headquarters simultaneously to execute synchronized public announcements. Inside the lead vehicle, the Home Secretary placed his leather folio on the seat beside him. He looked out the window at the bustling London streets waking up to a brand new day. The pedestrians walking along the pavement had no idea that the foundation of the modern monarchy had shifted irrevocably beneath their feet. Every historical barrier had fallen, and the unvarnished truth was finally ready to face the judgment of the British people. Observing everyday life from the windows of a moving state vehicle highlights the profound disconnect between ordinary public routines and the high-stakes machinery of constitutional governance. The vehicle turned sharply onto Parliament Square, pulling up directly beneath the towering shadow of the clock tower. The driver killed the engine, and the protection officer opened the rear door. The Home Secretary stepped out onto the damp pavement, adjusting his tie against the brisk morning wind. He walked up the stone steps toward the main entrance of the Government Administration Building, ready to oversee the final distribution of the historic documents to the National Press Corps. Entering government administrative centers during major national announcements requires strict adherence to media protocols, ensuring that official documents reach all accredited news outlets at the exact same moment. The public broadcast that shocked the nation. Studio cameras locked their focus onto the main anchor desk at the BBC Television Centre in London. The red recording light glowed brightly on top of the primary camera lens. The newsreader adjusted his papers on the glass desktop and looked straight into the lens. A copy of the official parliamentary register rested squarely beneath his right hand. The broadcast opened with the unvarnished announcement that verified excerpts from Princess Diana's 1997 correspondence had been entered into the public record earlier that morning. National broadcasting networks maintain statutory guidelines for transmitting verified state documents during major constitutional announcements, ensuring that original historical records reach the public without editorial distortion. Millions of television screens across the United Kingdom displayed high-resolution photographs of the blue stationery pages alongside forensic analysis certificates. The anchor read aloud the exact transcription of the recovered text detailing the financial transactions at Highgrove House. The familiar handwriting appeared in sharp clarity against the studio monitor. Viewers across the country could see the precise pen strokes and the official state stamps verifying the physical evidence. Exhibiting original historical documents during televised news broadcasts provides concrete visual proof that grounds complex investigative reporting in indisputable physical reality. An unexpected disruption occurred inside the master control room when a secondary emergency newswire began printing a breaking advisory bulletin. The studio director rushed onto the set and handed a printed slip of paper directly to the anchor. The anchor paused mid-sentence, glanced down at the fresh paper strip, and looked back into the camera lens with a steady expression. The advisory confirmed that former Clarence House administrators had abandoned all legal defense efforts following the public disclosure of the parliamentary record. Interrupting live broadcasts with breaking confirmation bulletins prevents misinformation from spreading during fast-moving institutional crises, ensuring that the public receives verified legal updates in real time. The anchor continued reading from the new bulletin. The report stated that all offshore shell company accounts linked to the 1997 financial transfers had been officially frozen by order of the High Court Financial Division. Assets totaling £24 million were slated for immediate return to the original Children's Hospital and humanitarian charitable trusts. The long-hidden financial trail was finally severed, and the stolen philanthropic funds were recovered for their intended purpose. Freezing illicit offshore accounts during active state investigations relies on international banking cooperation, frameworks that enable courts to intercept and repatriate diverted charitable capital back to national jurisdiction pools. A fresh update flashed across the lower third news banner. Prince William and Catherine released a brief, joint written statement from Kensington Palace thanking the Parliamentary Oversight Committee and the forensic audit teams for their unwavering commitment to historical truth. The statement emphasized that the complete disclosure of these records closes a painful chapter of institutional secrecy and restores absolute public accountability to the core of the British Crown. Releasing official royal statements following major constitutional disclosures establishes a clear institutional voice that reaffirms dedication to transparency and public trust. The news broadcast concluded with a wide-angle shot of the illuminated clock tower at Westminster Palace standing tall against the night sky. The final anchor commentary noted that this unprecedented exposure of historical documents permanently changes how the British monarchy handles internal accountability and public trust. Millions of citizens turned off their televisions as the broadcast feed faded to black. The long-concealed truths of the past had finally broken free into the open air, setting a permanent foundation for a transformed royal future under new leadership. The aftermath and the crown, renewed prince. William walked out onto the stone balcony of Buckingham Palace. The midday sun broke through the grey London clouds, casting a warm golden light across the vast crowds gathered in the mall below. Thousands of citizens stood shoulder to shoulder, holding banners and waving Union Jack flags in the crisp autumn air. William raised his right hand and offered a calm, steady wave to the cheering public. Catherine stood beside him in a tailored navy coat, her gaze fixed on the endless sea of faces stretching out toward Trafalgar Square. Gathering on the central balcony of Buckingham Palace follows centuries of traditional protocol for major national announcements. When profound constitutional shifts occur within the realm, reigning monarchs and direct heirs present themselves to the public to signify unity and stability. Down below on the gravel pavement, news reporters scrambled to broadcast live feeds of the royal family's appearance to millions of viewers across the globe. Television trucks lined the outer perimeter of the gates, their satellite dishes pointed toward the sky to transmit the live signals. The massive crowds fell silent as the loudspeakers mounted along the palace gates began to broadcast a recorded message from King Charles. The sovereign's voice echoed clearly across the plaza, confirming that all structural reforms and accountability measures were now officially enacted into permanent state law. Broadcasting official royal decrees to mass public assemblies utilizes localized acoustic systems to ensure transparent communication between the crown and the citizenry during historic transitions. An unexpected flutter of white doves broke from the rooftop corner above the central archway, soaring high into the bright blue sky above the monument. The crowd erupted into renewed cheers, waving their flags higher as the birds circled gracefully over the Queen Victoria Memorial. William lowered his hand from the stone railing and turned slightly toward Catherine. He spoke a quiet sentence about the hard road they had traveled to reach this moment, noting that the institution was finally built on a foundation of absolute truth. Releasing ceremonial birds during national celebrations symbolizes peace and renewal, marking a deliberate break from historical turmoil toward a transparent future. Catherine smiled softly and nodded in agreement. She looked out over the multitude of children sitting on their parents' shoulders, laughing and pointing toward the royal balcony. The long decades of hidden secrets and suppressed correspondence were finally consigned to the past. The monarchy had survived its most severe internal crisis by choosing unyielding honesty over comfortable silence. The true test of modern governance had been met and conquered. Observing public celebrations from elevated vantage points highlights the generational continuity of the crown, bridging past institutional burdens with future civic trust. The royal couple stepped back from the stone balustrade as the national anthem began to play through the courtyard speakers. Thousands of voices joined together in a unified chorus that echoed off the stone facade of the palace walls. William stood at strict attention, his eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the gates. The battle for the soul of the British crown was finished. A new era of unblemished duty and transparent service had officially begun for the entire Commonwealth. Singing the national anthem during major public gatherings reinforces collective identity and shared loyalty to the constitutional principles governing the United Kingdom. The dramatic rescue of Princess Diana's final diary and the complete dismantling of Camilla's decades-old cover-up mark an unforgettable turning point in royal history. By bringing these long-hidden truths to light, Prince William and Catherine have honored a mother's memory while permanently shattering the walls of institutional secrecy. The stolen charitable funds have been fully recovered, and the monarchy stands forever transformed by a courageous return to honesty and duty. Will these bold constitutional reforms inspire permanent confidence across the Commonwealth for generations to come? Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated as this extraordinary royal chapter continues to unfold.